Day one of the Senate confirmation hearings for President Donald Trump's Supreme Court Justice pick, Judge Neil Gorsuch, is now in the books. Here to talk about today and the whole confirmation process ahead is Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse, who sits on the Judiciary Committee. You were there today. Questioning begins tomorrow. For a lot of people, just hearing him talk was interesting because we haven't been exposed to him much. Here is one of his the pieces of his opening statement. Take a listen.
In the West, we listen to one another respectfully. We tolerate, we cherish different points of view, and we seek consensus whenever we can. My law clerks tell me that 97% of those 2,700 cases I've decided were decided unanimously, and that I've been in the majority 99% of the time. That's my record, and that's how we do things in the West.
So in the majority 99% of the time, those stats, it might be tough for Democrats to say he's out of the mainstream.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you listened to today and you heard a lot of attempts at hyperventilating, and I don't know what they have because the guy's a judge. He knows what a judge is, and he's agreeable and pleasant, and people, regardless of whether they've been appointed by Republican or Democratic presidents past, think that he's a great guy and a fine judge, and I think that's true.
So what is your sense of where Democrats are? I mean, a lot of the Democrats' opening statements had to do with being mad about Merrick Garland not being moved forward, right, the President Obama's pick, and also about concerns about different issues.
Yeah, I think there are a whole bunch of Democrats on the committee who, frankly, want a judge to be a super legislator. That's not what our founders wanted. It's not what the constitutional duty is. It's not what the oath is that a judge takes, and it's not what the American people want. But you had a bunch of Democrats trying to say, I wish the outcome were different in this case. You should have made it so. And he says, I'm not an emperor. I'm a judge, and I have to deal with the law as it is, not as I wish it to be.
So when they say, it's just not fair, when Merrick Garland wasn't taken up, what's your response?
We face a situation where we have a qualified judge in front of us today, and that's what we're called to act on. I can't go through every hypothetical that exists about the Biden rule and the Schumer rule and the last year of a2-term presidential administration. The reality is there's a guy in front of us now who knows what a judge's job is, and he should be confirmed. And frankly, I think he should be confirmed 100-0. And I think there are a bunch of Dems who want to vote against him because of their own politics and their own partisanship and their own concern about their base. But it's hard to figure out what any of their actual substantive arguments are against the guy as a judge who would be upholding the Constitution.
So is your sense that they're going to save their powder for the next fight, the next opening?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I hope for American civic health that there are a whole bunch of people who came into these hearings hoping they could find a way to vote against him, and they listen to him talk, and they listen to him affirm what a judge's job is, and they have to end up voting for him. I'm not betting on what that number is going to be right now, but I hope Democrats will listen seriously to his answers because he's a compelling, persuasive guy.
In legal circles, you talk to people, and obviously it's speculation, but that possibly Justice Kennedy is going to retire as early as this summer. Your sense of that?
Yeah, I don't have anybody staked out in front of his house and finding out if he's going to the doctor often and what he's eating for breakfast, and he should be eating Husker beef for breakfast. That's what we want everybody to do when you're a Nebraskan. But I think that there are 2 people on the court that are regularly looked to see if they're going to be the next shoe or 2 to drop and retire from the court. And I think if you're Justice Kennedy and you look at what this president has done in nominating such a fundamentally stable, honorable man to be the next justice, I mean, I think there are a number of folks who hope that Justice Kennedy will see that as a comforting sign.
Process-wise, is it easier for Republicans if Democrats push the issue now and force the hand of Senator McConnell to go to the nuclear option, which is 51 votes for Supreme Court justice, rather than having to do it for the next justice opening?
It's a great and a fair question for political handicapping. I get that. But the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that our kids don't understand the American system of limits on government. Kids don't know why we have 3 separate but equal branches. They don't know what it means that the First Amendment is this glorious inheritance we have. 40% of American kids or young adults under age 35 think the First Amendment is dangerous right now because you might use your freedom of speech to say something that would hurt somebody else's feelings, and they want a safe space. And we believe in principled pluralism. I don't want to fight about the politics of this. I want us to talk about what a judge's job is, and I want Democrats and Republicans to do the right thing and confirm this guy to the court. I think you're right. There's a very decent chance that if the Democrats decide to filibuster this, that it leads to a whole new conversation about how the Senate has to operate. But I think the only fact that's obvious is that the two facts are that Judge Gorsuch should be on the Supreme Court, and Judge Gorsuch is going to be on the Supreme Court.
You clearly were not a huge fan of Donald Trump as the candidate. Now he is president. You would say that this choice is a great decision by this president.
Kudos to the president for a really great nomination.
What do you say about the hearing today in the House where the FBI director said there is no evidence to support the president's tweets that President Obama ordered a wiretap?
You know, I've been in the Judiciary Committee meeting in the Senate all day today, so I've only seen a few headlines on it, but it's a big deal, right? I mean, we are going through a big civilization warping crisis of public trust. It's not because of one thing in the last 2 months. It's not because of the last presidential election over the course of the last year. It has to do a lot with the way we consume media over the course of the last decade or two, where we don't have a lot of shared facts in the country right now. That's a big problem, because you can't have a republic of free people that believe what we should believe as Americans, which is that the center of life is not this city. The center of life is where you raise your kids, and it's where you worship, and it's where you work. And then Washington exists to have servant leadership, to do a small number of really important things, to have a framework for ordered liberty that we pass on to the next generation. It's really important that we have shared facts about those things. So some of Director Comey's testimony today is a significant thing.
So what do you want the president of your party to do, the president of this country to do?
I would love it if the president would go out and explain to the American people what our national security strategy is for the next 25 and the next 50 years. Because the Cold War ended 27 years ago. The wall fell in Berlin in 1989. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. And we live in a world where when you talk to our generals, when you talk to our super spies, when you talk to people in the intelligence community, and I say to them, what keeps you up at night? They're worried about the future of cyber warfare. They're worried about jihadis. They're worried about non-state actors. And we need a national security strategy for 5 and 10 and 15 years in the future, and that requires the intelligence community to do some really important and hard stuff to protect our freedoms. Russia is not the only problem we face, but Russia does want to fracture NATO. Russia does want to create a world where there's more internal distrust of American against American, where we doubt our own values. And I would love to see our president go out and lead us forward to talk about who America is, what fundamental beliefs we share, and why the intelligence community is an important part of protecting and preserving those liberties.
Last thing, a couple of the conservatives in the Senate, your colleagues, have said that this health care bill as written is not going to pass. Do you agree with that?
I don't know how to vote count in the House of Representatives.
But how do you go?
We're going to get a different bill in the Senate. If something passes out of the House, it's going to be different than the thing they're debating right now. Obamacare needs to be fundamentally repealed, period.
Ripped up by the roots.
We need to get, absolutely, we need to get rid of Obamacare. We also need to replace it. We need to be building a system where Americans can buy the health insurance policies that they want and take them with them across job and geographic change.
You brought this message at home to Nebraska. Elkhorn, Nebraska was one of the places you had a town hall, and we have some video of that, and there were people with red cards and green cards, and every time you said something they didn't agree with, they held up the red cards, and there were a lot of red cards that we saw in some of the video.
Yeah.
Was it a rough sell?
So, a couple of things. First of all, the First Amendment is glorious, and the right of people to protest and scream and yell and give me the finger is completely legitimate, and I love their passion, right? I believe in the First Amendment deeply. At the same time, we need to recognize there are a whole bunch of people wanting more town halls right now that have a view of American freedom that's a little different than the vast majority of Americans. I think I did town halls and public events across Nebraska this weekend, and the town hall you're talking about in Omaha on Friday morning, I think we had 700 people at it, and about 500 of them raised their hand when I asked the question, do you believe in socialized medicine? Is that your goal? And it was a hefty majority of the audience. They have a different view than I have, and than most Nebraskans have, and than most Americans have. That's still important for me to go out and hear.
Does something get across the finish line?
I don't know. The president's going to go try to sell it to the House this week. I honestly don't know. There's some really good stuff in the House health care bill. There's also some stuff that doesn't do enough to make sure that we're ultimately dealing with the long-term crisis of not having health care costs become sustainable. It's too expensive for American families.
Senator Sasse, we appreciate you coming by.
Thanks for having me.